And your superpower is creating messes for me to clean up, she retorted, but there was no bite to it. The dynamic between them was surprisingly easy. The old games of cat and mouse were gone, replaced by the collaborative energy of two people trying to build something together. He respected her mind, and she in turn was beginning to respect his newfound humility and focus. At the end of the day, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple, Zach turned to her. "Come on," he said. "I want to show you the other half of the business." They walked out to the field where the balloon, a brilliant tapestry of red and gold, was tethered. "I thought we had a deal," she said, a hint of her old wariness creeping in. "You handle the balloon?" "This isn't a date, Alice," he said, his voice serious. "This is a business meeting. You're the manager. You need to know the product." He had a point. She climbed into the basket, her movements more confident this time. As they rose into the air, the roar of the burner was a familiar sound, but this time everything was different. They floated in a comfortable silence, watching as the last sliver of the sun disappeared, leaving a sky full of stars. The world below was a glittering carpet of lights. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Yeah," he said, his voice quiet. "At Island, he wasn't looking at the view, he was looking at her. Thank you, Alice, for taking a chance on me." She looked at him, the handsome, humbled pilot, silhouetted against the vast, starry sky. She thought of the diner, her safe harbor now, a warm and happy memory. This was her life now, a new and unknown territory. It was scary, it was uncertain, but as she looked out at the endless horizon, she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time, the thrilling, terrifying, and absolutely wonderful feeling of flight. Part 9 Ground Crew, Chapter 24, The First Booking. The romance of the starlit flight quickly gave way to the cold, hard reality of a fledgling business. The shoebox of receipts was just the tip of the administrative iceberg. Zach's business plan, Alice discovered, was less of a plan and more of a vague, optimistic hope. He had a magnificent balloon and was a world-class pilot, but he had overlooked a few minor details like business licenses, liability insurance, and a reliable propane supplier who didn't also run a questionable reptile farm out of the back of his truck. Their days fell into a new routine. Alice would spend her mornings on the phone wrangling with county clerks and insurance agents, her voice a firm, persistent force of reason. Zach would be out in the field meticulously checking the balloon's envelope for tiers, testing the burner and charming landowners into letting them use their fields for takeoffs. Their first real test came a week later. A call came in from a man who wanted to book a private sunrise flight for his wife's 50th birthday. It was their first high-paying customer, a chance to prove that Desert Skies Balloon Tours was a legitimate enterprise and not just a hobby with a business card. "This has to be perfect," Alice said, her focus absolute. She organized a pre-flight package with champagne and strawberries and coordinated with the husband to keep the whole thing a surprise. The morning of the flight, however, everything that could go wrong did. The grumpy owner of their designated takeoff field, a man named Henderson, who had a deep-seated mistrust of anything that floated, had blocked the gate with his tractor. "He says he's protesting the aerial gentrification of his airspace," Zach said over the phone, his voice tight with frustration. "Aerial," what Alice asked, already pulling on her jacket. "Stay there, I'm coming." She arrived to find Zach in a tense standoff with Henderson, who was sitting on his tractor with his arms crossed, looking as immovable as a mountain. Alice, channeling years of experience in de-escalating Mel's tirades, approached him not with arguments, but with a thermos of fresh coffee and 2 of Mrs. Walden's emergency snickerdoodles she had in her purse. 20 minutes later, after a surprisingly heartfelt conversation about the declining quality of modern farm equipment, Henderson was happily munching on a cookie and moving his tractor. Crisis averted, they raced against the rising sun to prep the balloon. But as Zach went to fire the burner, there was only a weak hiss. The main propane valve was stuck. "Don't panic," Zach said, though. Alice could see the line of sweat on his brow. He pulled out a toolbox and began working his hands, moving with a surgeon's precision. Alice stood by, holding a flashlight, her mind racing through contingency plans. This couldn't fail. With a final, forceful twist of a wrench, the valve gave way. The roar of the burner filled the pre-dawn silence. They got the balloon in the air just as the first rays of sun crested the mountains, painting the clouds a fiery pink. From the ground, Alice watched them go, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and relief. This was her work. This was her success. Chapter 25, An Old Habit. A few days later, Alice found herself with a free afternoon. On a whim, she drove to the diner. The familiar greasy smell hit her the moment she walked, in a scent that felt both foreign and deeply comforting, like a childhood home she no longer lived in. The place was in a state of low-grade chaos. A young, perpetually bewildered-looking waitress named Bambi was trying to take an order from 4 tables at once, while Mel bellowed contradictory instructions from the kitchen. Vera was calming a customer whose toast had been burnt to a cinder, and Jolene was on the phone trying to explain to a supplier why they had accidentally ordered 50 gallons of mayonnaise. Without thinking, Alice picked up an apron from behind the counter and tied it around her waist. "Bambi," she said, her voice calm and authoritative, "take a deep breath. Go handle table 3, I'll get the others." She grabbed her old order pad and moved through the room with an efficiency that was as natural as breathing. Within 10 minutes, the orders were in, the coffee was poured, and a semblance of order had been restored. Mel poked his head out of the kitchen, a look of profound relief on his face. "Thank God you're here," he said. This new girl couldn't find her own feet with a map and a flashlight. It was a bittersweet homecoming. She loved the familiar rhythm, the easy banter with the regulars. But as she watched Vera patiently explain the menu to Bambi, she knew she couldn't stay. This wasn't her life anymore. As she was untying her apron, Mel pulled her aside. "Look," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Bambi's not working out. Your old job is still here. If you want it..." The offer hung in the air, a tempting lifeline back to her old, safe world. For a fleeting second, she considered it. But then she thought of the sunrise, of the feeling of building something new, of the quiet pride she felt when she looked at the neat rows of files in her new office. "Thank you, Mel," she said, touching his arm, "but I already have a job." He nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. "Yeah, I know. Just thought I'd ask." She walked out of the diner, the bell jingling softly behind her, feeling the truth of her decision settle deep in her bones. She had loved being a waitress, but she was ready to be something more. Chapter 26, Under the Same Stars. The successful birthday flight was a turning point for Desert Skies Balloon Tours. The happy couple told their friends who told their friends, and soon the phone in the small hangar office was ringing off the hook. Alice found her role expanding. She wasn't just managing the books, she was the face of the company. She was the calm, reassuring voice that first-time flyers heard on the phone, the organized presence that greeted them in the field. Zach, in turn, blossomed as a pilot freed from the administrative tasks he loathed. He was charming and professional with the customers, his old arrogance replaced with a genuine passion for sharing the magic of ballooning. They became a team, their skills complementing each other perfectly. They developed a shorthand and easy rhythm of communication that made the complex logistics of each flight seem effortless. One clear, cool evening, they had a sunset booking for a young couple who were about to get engaged. As Zach took them up, Alice followed in the chase truck, her radio crackling with her happy exclamations. It was a perfect flight. Zach landed the balloon with a whisper-soft touch in a secluded desert wash, just as the last light faded from the sky. Alice pulled up in the truck to see the newly engaged couple sharing a champagne toast, their faces glowing. After she had driven them back to their cars, she returned to help Zach with the laborious process of packing up the massive balloon. They worked in the quiet darkness, the only light coming from the truck's headlights and a brilliant canopy of stars. The desert was profoundly silent, a welcome peace after the excitement of the flight. "We did good today," Zach said, his voice a low murmur in the dark. "We did," she agreed, folding a section of the heavy nylon. He stopped working and looked at her, his face half hidden in shadow. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Alice. I'd have probably crashed and burned by now, literally and financially." The sincerity in his voice was disarming. This wasn't a line. It was a simple statement of fact. "And I wouldn't be here if you hadn't taken a chance and come back to the diner," she replied. They stood there for a moment, the massive deflated balloon at their feet, the vast silent desert around them. It was a world away from the clatter and grease of Mel's diner, a world she had never imagined for herself. She thought of their first flight together, of his arrogance and her anger, of the tension that had crackled between them. Now, under the same stars, there was a different kind of energy, a quiet, comfortable hum of shared purpose and mutual respect. He took a step closer, and her breath caught in her throat. The air was charged with a possibility that was both terrifying and exhilarating, but he just smiled a small, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Come on, partner," he said, picking up a corner of the balloon. "Let's get this thing packed up. We've got another sunrise to catch." As they worked together folding the giant sail under the desert stars, Alice realized that the feeling of flight wasn't just about being in the air, it was about the leap of faith it took to get there. And for the first time, she felt like she wasn't flying alone. Part 10, Weathering the Storm, Chapter 27, Ampere's Cloud on the Horizon. The first few months of Desert Skies balloon tours were a blur of sunrises, spreadsheets, and successful flights. Alice and Zach's partnership solidified into a well-oiled machine. She was the anchor, the grounding force that managed the logistics on Earth, while he was the wings, the charismatic pilot who delivered the magic in the sky. The hangar office, once a chaotic corner, now hummed with quiet efficiency. They had a steady stream of bookings, a growing reputation for excellence, and even a new, slightly less ancient coffee machine. The harmony was so complete that the arrival of a new threat felt like a sudden, violent change in the weather. It appeared in the form of a glossy, full-page ad in a local tourism magazine. The ad featured a fleet of sleek silver balloons against a dramatic sunset. The name of the company in a bold, aggressive font was Phoenix Ascending.